Hi there. My name is Chris Noessel. This is a recorded session. My recording studio, such as it is in my garage, so please forgive any ambient noises that you might hear, like barking dogs or cars going by in the street outside, or even fireworks, which we've had quite a number of the past several weeks. In my day job, I design AI at IBM for a suite of products called the Sterling Supply Chain. But I'm not here today to talk to you about real-world AI. I'm here to talk to you about the stuff that we see in science fiction, movies and television shows to be exact. Let's start with a question. And I don't want you to think of your answer yet, but let me give you the question, which is, what role should AI play in medical diagnosis? And as you think of your answer, think about how your answer would change if I asked that question showing you this image. If you're not familiar, that's Baymax, a super huggable, healing superhero from the movie Big Hero 6. Now think about how your answer might change if I showed you this image instead. If you're not familiar, that's the unnamed doctor from the Star Trek Voyager series. Now, how would your answer change if I showed you this image along with the question? That's Ash from the original Alien movie. And even though we don't remember him for this, Ash was supposed to be like a medical officer aboard that spacecraft. Didn't turn out too well for his patients. But the point I'm trying to make with these different examples is that how people think about AI depends greatly on how they know AI. And most people know AI through sci-fi. So that raises a question. What stories are we telling ourselves about sci-fi AI? And what stories aren't we telling ourselves? And I first came up with this question when I was part of an AI retreat that happened in Norway. And it was an unconference. And we had to come up with questions that we wanted to try and answer with a really smart group of AI thinkers. And foolishly, I thought that we could knock it out in one 2-hour session, and that we made good, earnest progress. Turns out the project took me many, many months to complete once I got home. And so what I did is I went and looked at all the movies and television shows that I could identify that had AI in it. In total, that was 147 different titles, reaching all the way back to Metropolis with Fritz Lang and the robot that became Maria. And I watched each one of them, cataloged all of the characters, the AI characters, into an online database. And the question I asked myself as I watched each of these shows is, what do these titles suggest to us about AI? If an audience member got up from their cinema seat, or I guess in the time of COVID, from their couch, and they're like, I've just watched this movie. What did it try to get me to think about AI? And I called these things the takeaways. And I went one by one through each film and each character, looking at them and saying, okay, what is the takeaway here? But it did include some things like AI will seek on its own to subjugate us, like we see in the Matrix movies. It also included some super happy stuff, like AI will be useful servants. In addition to Baymax there, you can see Robbie the robot from the Forbidden Planet movie in the 1950s. These are examples of really useful servants that we saw. But it also included that sort of super silly stuff like AI is evil, as we see sort of comically represented with the robot devil in Futurama, or the disturbing movie Demon Seed. We see Proteus 4 there on the left-hand side of the screen. All told, I captured about 35 takeaways from science fiction movies and television shows. And in the graphic you see on screen and in the poster that I created from the project, the larger the type size, the more frequently that takeaway was found in the survey. So there we had it. We had 35 takeaways of what AI and sci-fi was trying to get us to do. So that was the first part of this study, and that took long enough. The second part of the study is, well, what stories should we be telling ourselves? And while I certainly have some opinions on that, I'm nobody's authority. Instead, what I did is I went out and tried to find either think tank manifestos or books that had been written specifically on the subject of AI. It included Google's AI manifesto to the JuVet agenda that I helped create at that AI retreat, to books that were created, such as Nick Bostrom's Super Intelligence. And similar to what I had done with the sci-fi movies, for the manifestos, I read each one and tried to tease out what it told us we should do. As I read these manifestos, I captured each of their imperatives, and similar to the study on the sci-fi movies and television shows, the larger the type size in these examples, the more frequently they appeared across the manifestos. Some of them were pretty obvious, like AGI's, General Artificial Intelligence's goals, must be aligned with ours. But it also included some other stuff, like, hey, we have to fund AI research. No surprise, considering it's AI scientists who are largely writing these manifestos, all the way down to, we must create effective public policy in advance of AI's creation. All told, there were 54 of these imperatives, and you can see them again on the poster if you like. I'm going to be referencing this poster quite a bit. It is the basis of the graphics that you see on screen, and if you want to see it or study it in more depth, you can jot this URL down and take a look at the poster for yourself. So, what I had at this point were a set of takeaways that 100 years of science fiction shows had suggested, and a set of manifestos that also had a series of suggestions on what we should do about AI. And that allowed me to simply cross-reference them, run a diff, if you will. Now, the first set of things were things that sci-fi did talk about that the manifestos said we ought to talk about. And those are connected in the graphic by these colored lines, sort of sweeping from the left to the right. And that's good. We should keep talking about those things and interrogating them thoroughly in our media. But it also included a set of things from movies that don't really connect anywhere in the manifestos. These I called pure fiction. They included things like AI is just evil out of the box. It also included things like what is the citizenry status or the citizenship status of AI, which is not really an issue until we get to general artificial intelligence, so I don't think manifestos care for it that much. But it also includes things like AI will want to become human. There's no guarantee of that, so it's silly, and we just probably ought to try and stop talking about those things. On the other side, we have a whole list of things that the manifestos talked about that didn't appear in science fiction movies and television shows. That is the collection of Untold AI. Going closer, we can see it includes things like AI must be accountable, or we have to develop broad machine ethics dialogue. We have to manage the labor markets that are sure to be upended by massive penetration of AI. We have to find new metrics for measuring AI. Now, that list in and of itself is really quite interesting. And on the way to getting to that list, I found a whole lot of other information, such as what countries produce the most sci-fi, what countries produce the sci-fi that's best associated with the science. Spoiler alert, it's Britain. And what shows are most obsessed with, what countries are most obsessed with producing AI. And surprisingly, it's Australia. As a percentage of the movies they produce, sci-fi is an unusually large percentage. And it included all sorts of other studies. I published each one of these on the blog under the Untold AI tag, so you can go and learn more about them, since I don't have enough time to go into each and every one here. But I will highlight one of my favorite bits, which is I identified 10 shows that adhere most closely to the science. And they include the number one, my favorite, which is Person of Interest. And of course, as you might imagine, 2001, A Space Odyssey, but even some relative unknowns that I adore, like Colossus, the Forbidden Project, or even some anime like Psycho-Pass. I also included in those studies a series of prompts for people who make sci-fi to consider as possible springboards for trying to tell some of those untold stories. I've even taken my hand at starting to write some of those, although, as you can imagine, a nonfiction author taking baby steps into fiction, I'm not sure how successful they are yet. But I really wanted to encapsulate all of the findings in sort of a report card about how well sci-fi is doing to the AI science. So after completing all that, I realized that there was a lot of information here and that I needed to parse it down to something more digestible. And what I wound up doing is creating something of a report card for sci-fi AI. And it was graded on 5 categories that sort of emerged from the manifestos. And the first category is that we should build the right AI. What I mean by that is that as we're working on narrow AI, it's got to be made ethically or transparently and equitably, or it's going to be used by evil forces to take advantage of the global systems that we depend on and make things worse. Right? If we're going to be working towards general AI, we have to make sure that it does what it's supposed to do and it doesn't do what it's not supposed to do, and that it's controllable in case things go haywire. We have to make sure that its incentives are aligned with human welfare before we allow it to evolve. And even to hedge our bets, it's a good idea to seed ASIs that balance each other and not just rely, cross our fingers and rely on the marketplace to do that. Sadly, sci-fi missed about 2/3 of this, mostly missing about how we make good AI good. So it didn't fare so well. The second category was that we should build the AI right. So not about the thing we create, but about how we go about creating it. Right? We have to make sure that we go about it cooperatively, ethically, and of course, make sure that it's effective. We need a big, diverse group of people in the room throughout the whole thing to ensure that we have diverse perspectives represented and equitable results. Right? If we use the wrong people or the wrong tools, it affects our ability to build the right AI, or even more to the point, it will result in an AI that is wrong on some critical point, and then that will get propagated out through to the entire world. Unfortunately, sci-fi misses about 3/4 of this, mostly because making AI is not as cinemagenic as, I guess, fighting AI is. Third category is that we must manage the risks and effects of AI. Right? We pursue this technology because it carries so much promise to solve problems at a scale that humans have never been able to manage themselves. But AIs carry with them risks that will scale as the thing becomes more powerful. We need ways to clearly understand and test it and articulate those risks so that we can be proactive about avoiding them. Unfortunately, sci-fi misses about half of this, mostly missing reasons why bad AI is bad. And the fourth category was we have to monitor AI, right? AI that is deterministic isn't even worth the name, but building non-deterministic AI means that it's also unpredictable and can allow malefactors to encode their own interests. To watch for this and know if it's active, well-intended AI if it's going off the rails, I mean, we have to know the metrics by which we can measure it. Its capabilities, how it's performing, and any rationale that it's providing for its actions. And we have to build those monitors and ensure that they're aligned with human welfare, and that they're able to provide enough warning that we can forestall problems, or at the very least, take the right action immediately when those problems occur. Sci-Fi misses about half of this, mostly missing the notion that there are metrics or agentive solutions. And the last category is that we should encourage an accurate cultural narrative. Right? If we mismanage that narrative, we as a population can either be lulled into complacency, that primes us to be victims of bad faith actors, or make us so fearful that we form sort of a Luddite mob, gathering pitchforks and torches and fighting to prevent any progress at all in the utility of this new tool for the global problems that we find ourselves with today. Legislators in particular hold power, and if they are misinformed, they could undercut progress or encourage the exact wrong thing. Sci-Fi, I think, misses all of this, except as it stays in line with the AI science. And fortunately, I've done that top 10 to help that. So all told, this is as tightly as I could condense these findings into 5 categories. And as you can see on the screen, Sci-Fi didn't do so well. I think its average was around 38%. Not so good. So, okay, there's a lot here. This was an information-rich study. So, as we come to the end, let's take a step back and think about the big picture for just a moment. If Sci-Fi is how the population at large knows AI, then what the study shows us is that what people know is mostly the wrong thing. We have work to do to educate people, technologists, legislators, and the makers of science fiction. And we also have work to do in ourselves. I mean, we, as a population, we love sci-fi, but we really have to keep it at arm's length to stay skeptical about it. It is first and foremost entertainment, and for that reason, we can't let it blind us or even misinform us. So, as I say nearly every time I present this material, stop watching sci-fi. Please start using it. Thank you.